One night, when she came in to check a monitor, she looked straight into my eyes and mouthed 4 words, "I know the truth." And in that moment, I knew I wasn't entirely alone. That night, I pretended to sleep when Mia came in. She adjusted the monitors like usual, but her hands were shaking. I could feel her nervous energy in the air. Then, just as she pulled the blanket over my shoulders, she leaned down and whispered so softly I barely caught it, "Don't trust Evelyn, or your chart." She tucked something into the blanket and left the room quickly. I waited until the cameras turned to their usual blind spot. Between 3:14 and 3:18 a.m., I had memorized it after staring at the red blinking light above my bed for days. I reached under the blanket with numb fingers and found a folded note inside a latex glove. Inside the glove, a burner phone, already powered on, set to silent. And on the screen, a message from Mia. "He's drugging you. Your file says you're delusional. I've seen it. I can help, but only if you stay quiet." Tears welled in my eyes, not from fear, but from relief. Someone believed me. Someone saw me. I typed back slowly, each tap a mountain. "Why?" Her answer came instantly. "Because I was you." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed out. Was she also a victim of someone like Vincent? Or worse? Of Vincent himself? Either way, I knew now. I wasn't crazy. And if I could keep my mind sharp, if I could pretend just a little longer, maybe I could escape this place. Maybe I could even take him down. But first, I had to learn to walk again. Not physically, mentally, I had to stand. In the only way I still could, with the truth. I started acting worse. Slower responses, blank stares. I even let the pills touch my lips before hiding them in my pillowcase. They wanted me weak, so I gave them weakness. But inside, I was waking up. Mia had told me not to trust my chart, so I asked Evelyn harmless-sounding questions. Am I improving? Will I ever walk again? Do the doctors think I'm stable? She gave the same robotic answer every time. Just focus on resting. Resting? While my mind was held hostage? I began tracking Evelyn's schedule. She always left for a break at 7:45 p.m. sharp. 10 minutes, no more. That became my window. Mia snuck me real water, my first unmedicated drink in weeks. She started leaving pages torn from my medical file beneath the mattress. And that's when I saw it. Patient demonstrates delusional tendencies, possible malingering, recommend continued sedation until husband's further notice. Husband's notice. Vincent controlled even my diagnosis. They had stripped me of autonomy, of truth, of even the right to be believed. But knowledge is power. And now, I had both. I started documenting everything I could remember, on the burner phone, in hidden notes, even scratched into the inside of the bed frame with a spoon Mia left behind. And slowly, I learned to speak again. Not with my voice, but with my silence. Because silence was all I had left to weaponize. For now. It was a stormy Thursday night when the hospital lost power for 7 minutes. 7 minutes. To most people, that's just an inconvenience. To me, it was a miracle. The emergency lights kicked on instantly, but the cameras? Dead. The door locks? Offline. For the first time in weeks, my door creaked open. Unlocked. Mia slipped in, soaked from the rain. No nurse badge, no clipboard, just urgency in her eyes. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She placed a small envelope in my lap and whispered, "Inside is a copy of your real chart. The one Vincent doesn't know I found. Hide it well. And Alina, time is running out." She turned to leave, then paused. "You have one person on the outside you can still trust. Your sister, Emery. I found her. She's been looking for you." My breath caught. I hadn't heard Emery's name in months. Vincent had told me she moved overseas, stopped calling, wanted nothing to do with me. But he lied. Again. As Mia disappeared into the shadows, I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside, a flash drive, a printed file, and a post-it with just 2 words, "Trust this." The lights flickered back on. My door locked again with a hard click, but I didn't feel trapped this time. I felt ready. Vincent thought he had buried me in silence. But silence was only the beginning of my voice. That night, after Evelyn gave me my nightly sedative, I slipped it into my cheek and waited. Once she left, I spat the pill into a tissue and pulled the flash drive from under my mattress. Mia had tucked a tiny adapter into the envelope too. Bless her. I plugged it into the hospital's bedside monitor, praying the outdated software would read it. It did. What came up first wasn't text. It was video, security footage, date stamped, angle from the top of the stairs. There I was, standing, arguing with Vincent. I watched it unfold like a ghost trapped in her own past. I remember the weight of that ring more than the weight of my own body now. It wasn't heavy because it was gold. It was heavy because I didn't choose it. My name is Alina Hart, and when I was 23, my parents told me I was going to marry a man named Vincent Ray, a billionaire, twice my age, a man I'd only seen in headlines and nightmares. "It's a blessing," my mother said. "It's your duty," my father insisted. But no one asked what I wanted. Vincent had power, money, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He owned 3 luxury resorts and more than a dozen politicians. What he didn't own yet was me. The wedding was scheduled just 12 days after I met him. It was more of a deal than a union. My father's company was saved from bankruptcy overnight. In return, I was sold like a bargaining chip. I wore white, but I didn't feel like a bride. I felt like a prisoner in silk. That night, Vincent whispered into my ear at the altar, "You'll learn to behave, Alina, or you'll suffer in silence." And he meant it, because I did suffer, in ways no one could see, until one day I couldn't feel my legs. Vincent's mansion wasn't a home, it was a fortress. 4 stories tall, marble floors, staff that never made eye contact, and cameras everywhere. He didn't hit me, not at first. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he controlled what I ate, who I saw, when I could speak. He controlled my wardrobe, my phone, my passwords, even my sleep. "You're mine," he said one night while locking the bedroom door behind him. "Not because of love, because I paid for you." I tried calling my sister once. The next morning, my phone was shattered on the marble tiles. The staff never talked, but the looks they gave me said everything. They knew, but they wouldn't risk their jobs for me. I started keeping a journal in the seam of one of my pillowcases. I wrote down everything he said, every bruise I could hide, every time he told me, "Don't forget who saved your family." The irony? My parents never even checked in on me. They were too busy smiling in the society pages, basking in the glory of having a billionaire son-in-law. I wasn't living, I was surviving. Until one night, I slipped on the stairs, or at least that's what the report said, but I remember a hand, Vincent's hand, shoving. I woke up in a hospital bed, cold, number silent. The lights buzzed above me and my body felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. I tried moving my legs. Nothing, not a twitch, not a shiver. A nurse came in. Her name was Mia. She looked young, maybe early 30s, but her eyes were older, tired, full of knowing. She checked the machines and said quietly, "You're lucky to be alive." I wanted to scream, "No, I'm not lucky, I'm trapped." But I couldn't say anything yet. I was still too sedated, too scared. The official report said I slipped. Vincent told everyone I was clumsy. "She was rushing down the stairs in heels," he told the doctors. "She's always in a hurry." But I remembered everything. I remembered the argument. I remembered him grabbing my arm. I remembered the look in his eyes, cold, bored, annoyed. I remembered the shove, and then the air, and then the stairs. 10 steps. That's all it took to paralyze me from the waist down. When Vincent finally came to visit, he brought white roses. White. For purity. For silence. For pretending everything was fine. He leaned down and whispered, "Say one word and I'll make sure your parents lose everything." Then he smiled for the nurses like nothing happened, and that's when I realized, if I wanted to survive this time, I had to stop playing the good wife. They moved me to a private recovery suite the next day, not because I needed rest, but because Vincent wanted control. No roommates, no visitors, no sunlight. Just a cold room with pale walls and a locked door only the nurses could open with a keycard. I was told it was for my peace and privacy. But really, it was a cell. Vincent called it protection. Protection from who? I wasn't a danger to anyone, except maybe to his perfect image. He assigned me a private nurse. Not Mia. Another woman named Evelyn. Robotic. Silent. Cold. She never made eye contact. She never brought me a phone. She never answered when I asked what day it was. It was like I had disappeared. And then came the pills. Muscle relaxers, Evelyn said, but they made my thoughts foggy. My memories scatter like dust. I stopped writing in my hidden journal because I could barely hold a pen. I would wake up at strange hours, not knowing how I fell asleep. Every time Vincent visited, he brought more flowers. And more lies. He told the doctors I was emotionally unstable, that I had attempted to harm myself. He said I was confused, fragile, not well enough to talk. He created a version of me so broken that even the nurses treated me like a ticking bomb. But Mia, remember her? It was the anniversary of the fall, 1 year since the day Vincent pushed me down the stairs and tried to erase me. Emery asked me gently that morning, "Do you want to do something today, or just rest?" I looked out the window. The wildflowers in our garden were in full bloom. Not one was perfect, but all of them were alive, like me. "I want music," I said. "I want to remember that I'm still here." So we set up a speaker in the backyard. She played one of our favorite songs from childhood, something light, hopeful, something free. And I rolled myself out there between the flowers, under the open sky. Then I stood, with braces, support rails, and shaking arms. I pulled myself up, and I danced. Not gracefully, not quickly, but beautifully. Emery cried. I laughed. Because in that moment, I wasn't the girl who had been forced into marriage. I wasn't the woman who had been silenced, sedated, or shoved. I was just Alina. Alive, free, whole in ways no X-ray could ever show. And as I turned slowly, arms open to the wind, I whispered the words I never thought I'd get to say. This is my life, and I choose it now. Every step, every scar, every second forward, I choose it. And I swear I felt it then. Not just the wind, but the future. I wasn't just the girl who got pushed down the stairs. I was the woman who stood back up without using her legs. Life didn't magically fix itself after the trial. My legs were still paralyzed. I still had nightmares. And my parents? They never apologized. Not once. They sent flowers to the hospital twice, but never came to visit. It told me everything I needed to know, so I cut them off, completely. Not out of hatred, but out of healing. Some people can't come with you when you rise, and I was finally rising. I moved in with Emery for a while. She turned her guest room into an accessible haven, low counters, ramps, wide doors, but more importantly, it had warmth, safety, freedom. I started volunteering with women's shelters, speaking quietly at first, then loudly, then in front of microphones. I told my story again and again, not because it didn't hurt, but because it helped someone else every time I did. And one morning, as the sun poured through the window, I wheeled myself out onto the porch and sat there quietly, just breathing. No machines, no sedatives, no one watching me. Just me. Alive. Free. Mine. That morning, I opened my laptop and typed the first line of the book I never thought I'd write. They broke my body, but they could never touch my soul. And for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled without pain. There were so many things I wanted to say, but some words are better written than spoken. So I started writing letters, not to be mailed, just to release. The first one was to my parents. You traded my life for your pride. I hope the silence you now sit in feels heavier than the money you gained. Then to Vincent, you thought you owned me. But ownership ends when a person chooses themselves. I chose me. And finally, one to myself, the girl I used to be. You were scared. You were silenced. But you never stopped hoping. You were never weak. You were just waiting to wake up. I folded each letter and placed them in a box under my bed labeled, "Truths That Set Me Free." That box doesn't weigh much, but it holds the heaviest pieces of my story. Sometimes at night I still feel the ghost of Vincent's hands, still hear the echo of my father's voice saying, "This is what's best." But now, when I wake up from those dreams, I don't cry. I breathe. Because I am not my trauma. I am my survival. 6 months after the trial, Emery and I moved into a little cottage on the edge of town. It had chipped paint, a crooked porch, and more weeds than flowers in the yard. But it was ours. There was a small raised garden bed out back. On my first day there, I wheeled myself over and stared at the dry soil. "I don't have a green thumb," I said, laughing. Emery knelt beside me with a packet of wildflower seeds. "You don't need to. You just have to believe something broken can still grow." We planted them together. That spring, I started walking again, not with my legs, they were still unresponsive, but with braces, rails, and the fiercest determination I had ever known. Every inch forward was a war. Every step, a rebellion. And when the first flower finally bloomed in our little garden, I cried, because it didn't just mean life, it meant hope, the kind of hope they tried to take from me. I started hosting support groups for survivors in that house. Women, some in wheelchairs, some with scars you couldn't see, sat in a circle in our living room. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we just existed. And that was enough. Because when you've been through fire, just being alive is a kind of revolution. It started with a blog post, just a few paragraphs, no photos, no names. I titled it, "The Ring I Never Wanted." Within 24 hours, it had 18,000 shares. By the end of the week, a women's rights organization contacted me. They wanted to republish it. They wanted me to speak. I was terrified. But I said yes, because my voice had once been stolen. And now I was going to use it, loudly. I gave my first public talk from my wheelchair on a small college stage. The lights were blinding, but I focused on the front row. Young women, eyes wide, pens ready. I told them the truth. I told them about forced love, invisible cages, and surviving what people swore couldn't be survived. I ended with this. The world told me I was broken, but I became unbreakable, not despite what happened to me, but because I chose to rise from it. The room stood, not out of pity, but out of recognition, because pain is universal, but so is strength. A month later, a publisher reached out. They wanted the full story. I agreed, on one condition. All proceeds would go to women's shelters. I didn't need revenge, I had impact. And that, to me, was justice. Mia backed me up. She showed them the footage, the falsified charts, even the hidden medical memos Vincent had tried to bury. The detectives left with copies of everything. One of them turned back at the door and said quietly, "We believe you." I didn't know how badly I needed those words, but that wasn't the end. There was still me, my broken body, my uncertain future, my missing pieces. I started physical therapy the next week, 3 times a day, with a woman named Carla who didn't sugarcoat a thing. "You may never walk again," she told me, "but we're not going to sit around and cry about it, are we?" I laughed. For real, not because it wasn't painful, but because it was. And I was finally strong enough to face it. Meanwhile, Emery flew in. She burst into the room like a hurricane of warmth, tears in her eyes, hugging me so tightly I thought my ribs would crack. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm not," I said, "because I survived." For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't scared of tomorrow. I was rebuilding, not just my legs, but my life. They say healing isn't linear. They're right. Some days I felt invincible, sitting upright, feeding myself, laughing with Emery like we were kids again. Other days I stared at my legs and felt like a ghost trapped in my own skin. But the difference now? No one was controlling me. I chose when to cry. I chose when to fight. I chose everything. Emery moved into a short-term rental near the hospital. She came every day, sometimes with fresh coffee, sometimes with court updates. "Vincent's been formally charged," she said one afternoon, her voice trembling with relief. "Aggravated assault, medical fraud, and obstruction." He was out on bail, of course. Rich men always float, but the case was moving, and so was I. During one therapy session, Carla placed a mirror at the base of the mat and told me, "Look down." I saw my toes. They weren't moving, but I wasn't looking for movement anymore. I was looking for ownership. Those legs were mine. Paralyzed or not, they were mine. Later that night, I wrote something in my journal, the same one that once held fear, now filled with fragments of power. They broke my body, but they did not break my will. That was the night I slept with no nightmares, because the worst had already happened, and I was still here. 3 weeks later, I entered the courtroom in a wheelchair. But I didn't feel small. Vincent was there, seated across the aisle with his legal team, tailored suit, slicked hair, fake calm. He wouldn't even look at me. Good. Because I was the one looking now. The courtroom was packed, press observers. Even my parents were there, sitting in the back with stiff faces like strangers at a funeral. I was sworn in. And for the first time since my fall, I told my story out loud. No interruptions, no sedation, no more silence. I told them how I was coerced into a marriage for financial gain, how Vincent isolated me, drugged me, humiliated me, how he pushed me down the stairs, then covered it up with money and lies. I watched the jury as I spoke. Some were horrified, some teary-eyed, but none looked away, and neither did I. Vincent's lawyer tried to twist my words. "She's emotionally unstable," he argued, "has a history of exaggeration." But Mia took the stand right after. Calm, clear, brave. She showed them the footage, the altered medical files, the sedative schedule. Then Emery took the stand and described the months she spent searching for me, blocked by my parents, stonewalled by Vincent's people. It all came together like puzzle pieces they couldn't deny. When I was wheeled out of that courtroom, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a survivor. No, I felt like a witness to my own rising. The courtroom was dead silent when the jury foreman stood. My hands trembled, not from fear, those days were behind me, but from the sheer weight of the moment. "All rise," the bailiff said. Vincent remained still like he already knew. The judge read the charges one by one. Aggravated assault, guilty. Medical coercion, guilty. Falsification of records, guilty. False imprisonment, guilty. Each word hit like thunder. But this time, they didn't shake me. They steadied me. Vincent's face stayed frozen in disbelief, like the world had turned on him overnight. But it hadn't. He just finally lost control. The sentence? 20 years. No bail, no buyout, no mansion waiting at the end. When they cuffed him, he looked at me for the first time in weeks. His eyes weren't angry. They were empty. Like he finally realized I was never his possession. I was something far more dangerous, a woman who lived. After court, reporters swarmed. Emery shielded me with her coat like we were kids running from rain. But I didn't mind the flashes this time, because now when the world saw me, they saw the truth. He grabbed my arm. I pulled back. He shoved me, hard, and then I fell. There it was. Proof. No accident. No slip. No heels. Just him. Pushing. The next file was even worse. A scan of an internal memo, doctors noting inconsistencies in the patient's cognitive behavior, with a handwritten note at the bottom, "Husband requests ongoing sedation, says she's too unstable to be trusted. Compliant wife is best." I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred, my life rewritten in lies. But not anymore. Now I had evidence, the footage, the memos, the medical records. I backed it all up to the burner phone and emailed it to the only address I remembered by heart, emery.hart93 @ Then I added one line, "I need you." Sent. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. Not out of fear, out of hope. I didn't expect her to respond. Not right away. Not after everything Vincent told me. That she left me, that she didn't care, that I was alone. but less than 6 hours later, the burner phone buzzed under my pillow. One new email. Subject: I never stopped looking for you. From Emery Alina. Oh my God, I thought you were dead. I knew something was wrong, but no one would tell me where you were. Mom and Dad cut me off when I started asking too many questions. I didn't stop. I won't stop. I'm coming to get you. Just hold on. And thank you for the video. That bastard's going down. Love you always. E. I sobbed into my pillow, holding the phone like it was the only real thing left in my life. But I knew I had to be smart. Vincent still had eyes everywhere, and he'd smell panic the moment I gave myself away. So I wrote Emery one sentence. Wait for my signal. I'll know when. And then I wiped the message. That night, Vincent came to visit. He brought more roses, red this time. He even kissed my forehead like a grieving husband. Maybe I'll take you home soon, he said, his voice dripping with poison. You'll be better off there. With me. Safe. I smiled at him for the first time in weeks. And I meant it. Because he had no idea. The trap he built for me was about to collapse. It happened 3 days later. Mia rushed into my room during the early shift, face pale, voice low. Evelyn knows. She found the empty pill capsule. You have to act now. Panic swelled in my chest, but I held it back. I had been waiting for this. I'm ready, I whispered. Mia nodded and slipped me a nurse's tablet. I disabled the alerts. You've got 5 minutes. Send whatever you need to. My fingers flew across the screen. I opened the email app. Attached the raw video footage, the false medical records, and a voice memo I had secretly recorded of Vincent's last visit. In it, you could hear him clearly say, "You belong to me, and no one will ever believe you." I typed the subject line, "This is my truth," and hit send. Then, the last thing. A 2-word message to Emery. It's time. Mia took the tablet and vanished just as Evelyn entered the room with her cold plastic smile. But I had already won the moment she walked in, because I wasn't just a girl in a hospital bed anymore. I was a ticking clock, and time was on my side now. Later that evening, Vincent showed up unannounced. He didn't smile. He didn't bring flowers. He slammed the door behind him and hissed, "What did you do?" I looked him dead in the eyes and said nothing. Because silence now was louder than any scream. Vincent paced the room like a storm trapped in a bottle. "I asked you a question," he snapped. "What did you do?" I didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't even breathe loudly, because silence was no longer my prison. It was my strategy. He grabbed the edge of my bed, leaned in close. "You think people will believe a paralyzed woman? One who's been sedated for weeks? They'll call you unstable, delusional, a liability." Still, I said nothing. That's when he cracked. He grabbed my pillow and held it tightly in his fists, like he might use it. His knuckles were white, eyes wild. Then the door burst open. Mia and 2 security guards. "Step away from the patient," she ordered, voice sharper than I'd ever heard. Vincent scoffed. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes," Mia said coldly. "And so does the police department. They've seen the footage." His face went pale. "They're reviewing everything now," she continued. "The medical records, the emails, the video of you pushing her." He looked at me one last time, like a man watching his kingdom burn, and muttered, "This isn't over." But even as he stormed out, I knew it was. Because this time, I was writing the story, and I had just taken back the pen. The next morning, the police showed up. 2 detectives, one kind, one skeptical. They asked questions I'd been dying to answer for months. I told them everything, how the marriage wasn't a choice, how the abuse started slowly, first my voice, then my body, then my mind, how I was pushed down those stairs,